Look at this. The tape recorder. It's running.
His mind and his body are working together. As he talks, he paints a picture with words and with gestures.
Take it easy, friend. We're doing the best we can to help you.
Yes, but where in the solar system could it have come from?
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give to be the truth?
Truth.
And soul!
Truth and Soul Incorporated, the New Zealand advertising podcast.
Today we talk with Marty O'Halloran, who is currently, or until recently, head of DDB Australia and New Zealand, but has recently been appointed CEO of DDB Global, which is a great achievement for somebody down here, especially with such a respected giant of the industry as DDB. Now, I worked with Marty for 5 years at DDB in the early 2000s, and I'll be looking to find out what drives him, what makes DDB so consistently successful over the last 20 years, who his kids support at rugby, and what was the magic formula that has been so successful down here and whether or not it can translate globally. We'll also talk about what convinced him to come to the backwater of Auckland after the sophistication of Melbourne. We'll talk about the highlight of his career and discuss why it was working with me. There are also plenty of tips for those foolish enough to want to grow up and run an international network. So listening closely, children. So, big welcome to Marty O'Halloran of, so are you still CEO of, chairman of DDB Australia and New Zealand, or not?
No, I've lost that job.
So you're in between jobs?
No, the new role started immediately. Literally the moment they announced it, it all came flooding towards me. So
you have Justin Moday in charge of New Zealand, and
yes.
you have
Andrew Little,
who was Brisbane, then Melbourne, then Sydney with DDB,
yep.
and very much a fan of Bundaberg from memory.
Yes, he still likes the odd Bundaberg, but he's mellowing in his age.
The Queenslander. So there's nobody sitting over the two of them?
No, and look, both of them, Andrew's worked for me for 20 years and Justin 10, and I'm going to remain chairman of Australia and New Zealand, just because I don't think they need someone in a regional role.
Yeah.
They're both doing a great job. Both businesses are doing well.
Yeah.
So I'll check in with them once a week and look after Australia and New Zealand as well as the rest of the 200 offices. Yeah,
and when they bugger it up, I'm sure you'll be down.
Give me an excuse to come back.
You'll be down quite soon. Now, Marty, just having been announced as the new CEO of DDB Global, which is a great achievement for a semi-New Zealander. Officially Australiander, but I'm sure there's a bit of Kiwi in there. So he's been doing a lot of podcasts and chat. This morning you did the Wall Street Journal.
Yes, and the highlight is coming to see you tonight. But yes, I did start with the Wall Street Journal this morning.
Excellent. I'll have a listen to that whenever that's up. And Paul McIntyre, is he from the Australian?
Yeah, he's got his own podcast, but he spent a lot of time at the Australian. He's a great journalist, actually. So I had a good chat with him the other day as well. Yeah,
great journalist means that his questions are not too taxing. But Jonathan Cole, did you see Jonathan Cole and Trump?
Yes, he was amazing. That was so clever.
He must have had a great relationship with Trump before that meeting to Trump not to throw things at him.
Unbelievable. I don't think Trump actually saw it coming.
Well, he seemed to quite like him. Jonathan, and you've been doing this and that, and that was I think the most amazing political interview I've ever seen.
Masterclass.
Until this one.
Until this afternoon, yes.
Until this afternoon. So, Marty, where did it all go wrong? You've got to head up to New York at some stage, October.
Yeah, I'm hoping up to get there October, November, but. The office in New York's not open yet. Neither's Chicago.
Wow.
So we're actually doing a refit of the New York office. We're moving, but
because from Madison Avenue.
Yeah, moving down to 195 Broadway, down into the financial district.
Yeah.
But they're not ready to go back into the office yet. So I think at the earliest it'll be October, maybe November, maybe not even until January. So I will not go up there until the office is open. So I'll just work remotely.
How is that working out? So you're working all hours of day and night, are you?
Yeah, it's very taxing. 9 o'clock in New York is 1 o'clock in New Zealand. So I had my first week in the job, I had a finance meeting with Omnicom that started at 1 a.m., finished at 6 a.m., and we went through every P&L of every DDB office globally.
So you had to be quite switched on.
That was a good introduction.
Jeepers. So I remember 20 years ago, DDB New Zealand was one of the top 5, viewed as one of the top 5 agencies by DDB globally. And have those 5 agencies stayed pretty solid at the top? I seem to remember, I think Singapore was in there.
Yeah, pretty much. The top agencies at the moment are London, of course, Paris, Singapore strong.
Sorry, these the top ones outside America?
Top, including America.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's Chicago's a great office.
Yeah.
New York's got work to do to get back to where it should be. But yeah, a lot of the offices that have been doing well have been doing it consistently. There's great agencies like Alma in Miami, Alma DDB, which is a Hispanic agency, but they do it's actually quite a big agency, probably the leading Hispanic agency, and obviously that's a huge market in the US. But Brazil is still very strong. Yeah. It would have been back 20 years ago.
Is Africa still going?
Africa is
Africa to the non-DDB is an offshoot of DDB in Sao Paulo?
Yes, it is.
And they had a limited number of clients and
ran
a different business model.
It was a wonderful story. When they first started, they said, we'll only have 8 clients.
Yeah.
And they very quickly got to 8 clients, and there was a waiting list.
Yeah.
So
have they maintained 8 clients, or are they now up to 32?
To be honest, I don't know exactly how many they've got, but I think it was a great statement in the early days that really we'll only work with people that want to do the kind of work we want to do.
Yeah.
And in Brazil, they were the rock stars of the industry. So I haven't seen anyone do that in New Zealand lately.
Well, I think advertising folk in South America are viewed as rock stars generally, I believe. I think in Argentina and Brazil, they have a lot higher status than us poor New
and when I
Zealanders
talk
do.
to the people in a lot of South American offices, they talk about the presidents being their best friends, and they're very connected to the political powers. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's kind of take it all back, Marty, and go back 50 years, or I don't know. So you're originally from Melbourne.
Yes.
And you went to school in Melbourne, and you started off in rowing.
Yep, went to school in Melbourne, and I was a rower at school, and did a bit of that after school. And I've been at DDB 34 years, and I've been in the workforce for 35 years. So my first year was as a graduate at Colgate-Palmolive, and
that's a very disciplined in marketing.
Yeah, it was a marketing graduate role, and but the first 6 months you get a station wagon and a car full of toothpaste and soap powder, and go and visit supermarkets. Yeah, so that was actually a great experience, and it was one of the guys at the rowing club who worked at USP Needham. Yeah, and he drove. I'll never forget. He had a red BMW, and he always dressed really well, and he seemed like he really enjoyed his job. And he said to me one day, "Why don't you come and work at the agency? You know, you're wasting your time driving around in a station wagon with toothpaste." And I thought, "Oh, he's dressed well. He seems to earn a good dollar, and I'll go and have a look at this opportunity."
I'm not sure about a red BMW. I don't think any car should be red, really. But
no,
we'll let that pass. So. What did you? What I'm trying to do here is, believe it or not, there is some degree of method in this madness, which is to find out for any listeners who want to end up as a global CEO of an advertising agency, how you start doing it. So, what was your degree in?
I did a degree in economics and marketing.
Yeah,
and always loved the marketing side of things, and my first job was actually working on the McDonald's business out of Melbourne, and it actually, it's amazing when you first join an agency, and I think we forget this sometimes when the young people join. It's a whole different language to what you're taught at university. And people start talking about tarps and pneumatics and 3/4 inches and a whole language. You just go, I've got no idea what these people are talking about. Yeah. And it actually was a sad day when I joined DDB because the first fax machine arrived, and the girls in the telex room were packing up their bags because they just lost their jobs because, there was no need for telex anymore. And there was like half a dozen of them. And then this one fax machine replaced 6 people. And so I'm this young bloke arriving going, it's a very different world.
If you don't know what a fax machine is, listeners, ask your parents. If you don't know what a telex machine is, ask your grandparents. But sadly, my first job had a telex machine in it, which is kind of dating me quite a bit. So you were taken on as a graduate trainee by the DDB?
Yes.
Yeah, and so did you have to go backwards a bit because you already had a job at Colgate? You already...
well, no, as you know, in advertising, you get sort of thrown in straight away. Yeah. And it was good just working on one account because you then were able to just focus on the job at hand. And it's really interesting. I think when you first start at that level, the whole idea of creativity and what really drives an agency is not front of mind. And
no.
And I think it's probably a lesson for us that run agencies now is to, are we hiring people just because they're good marketing graduates or they seem like nice people or they can get a job done for a client? Or are we hiring people because they've got a passion for doing great creative? And I think if I'm honest, I took the job.
You didn't have that.
And I didn't have that passion.
You didn't have that passion, but you probably worked out okay.
Yeah, I was a marketer and I said, well, this looks like a fun... McDonald's was obviously in its growth phase and was considered to be like the marketing client to work on in terms of everything that they were doing at the time. So, and it wasn't until... I think I'd been at the agency for 6 months, and at one of the all-staff meetings, they played a reel of DDB work from around the world, and that just stopped me in my tracks. Yeah. And all of a sudden, I saw this world of amazing creative, and it just made me realise what this business is all about. And probably for that first period, it didn't even occur to me. Yeah, we had some big clients in the Melbourne office then, Ford and Cadbury and Telecom, which became Telstra.
Yeah.
So there was lots of great work being produced, but then that next level of creative that was coming out of Europe and North America at the time just blew me away. And then, it just sort of set fire to the passion, really.
And you did, as all people who work on McDonald's, you had to spend a day. Sorry, not had to. You enjoyed spending a day in McDonald's working behind the till.
Yeah, and I think you learn a lot from that. And I think there's again, anyone that works in our industry to actually work with a client organisation is a really smart thing to do. You get amazing insights in terms of how things work and why people like the brand and things like that. And McDonald's, it used to be one day a year we'd all go. Right. Everyone that worked on the account would go and work there for a day, and it's exhausting, but a lot of fun. And you always come back with something out of it.
So you've worked on McDonald's as long as you've been at DDB?
Yep. No, I really have. I've been involved with it for 34 years, and last week I was chatting to the regional CEO based in Australia about how the business was going across Australia and New Zealand, and it's a very different business to what it was back then. But again, my job has always been just to get a lot of really good people and keep changing the sort of people we put on the account because the business has changed dramatically.
It's interesting that you worked on Colgate and McDonald's. They're both very structured, very clever marketing organisations. I worked on both of them in various different countries as well. And but McDonald's work at times is absolutely fantastic.
The thing I like about McDonald's, while there's a framework for McDonald's advertising, there's local freedom. And if you think about the work we do out of New Zealand and Australia, it's considered to be some of the best work in the world. Because we understand what's happening locally, and local clients have the power to produce brand work in particular. That wasn't me, that was the dog. Have the power to produce work that's right for the business. And, the Kiwi Burger campaign's on air at the moment, and your good mate Pete Thompson's
old ad,
wrote that, I think, bloody 30 years ago. But I remember the global president of McDonald's just happened to come into New Zealand as we were selling that campaign into McDonald's, and the CEO at short notice just bought this guy called Fred Turner, who was the number 2 employee that Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, employed. And he just arrived unannounced, and he said, "So what's the latest thing you're working on?" And I said, "Oh, there's Kiwi Burger," and we presented the script. I think Pete presented the script to him, and this bloke, he just couldn't get his head around it. He said, "So you're going to do a burger with beets in it and an egg?" And he thought we were crazy, but he said, "It feels like the right thing to do, because if that's what Kiwis want, let's go and do it." And credit to Pete Thompson, for coming up with that idea.
And it worked. So just going back, we're in Melbourne. How long were you at DDB Melbourne?
Only 2 years.
Okay, so Melbourne, from my experience over there, and from the citizens of Melbourne, it's a great city, but the citizens of Melbourne love it, and often they don't want to leave, and they certainly don't want to leave to go to New Zealand. What prompted you to transfer your skills after 2 years from Melbourne over to take a step backwards, as it were, into New Zealand?
Well, it was a funny thing, because I'd done 2 years, and I worked really hard to try to make an impression, and I was in an offshoot role running a regional part of the McDonald's business for Victoria and South Australia, and the main part of the account was in Sydney.
Yeah.
And they kept promising me that they'd transfer me to Sydney to work on the main part of the business, and I think I was doing too good a job in Melbourne, and they didn't want to disrupt that. And
that's your view, anyway.
That's my view.
Yeah.
But then we actually had a conference with some New Zealand blokes that came across. One of them was Doug Foday.
Yeah.
And he and I got on like a house on fire, and he tried to he went to the David Fernley, who at the time was running DDB Australia, and said, "Look, can I take this young bloke over to New Zealand, because I need an account director for the McDonald's business."
Yeah.
And they kept promising me that, no, you don't take this role. We want you to eventually go up to Sydney. And 6 months went on, and I think they were just sort of stalling me.
Yeah.
So in the day, I actually resigned, and then the next day I was employed by DDB New Zealand, because back then the two officers couldn't work out how to transfer a young talent.
I think we've probably got it more together these days. And listeners, in case you've been paying attention to the backstory of Truth and Soul, we've done a previous episode with Michael Foday, who is the son of Doug Foday, who is the English-Australian guy, English-Australian Kiwi, a lot of mixed sort of nationalities, who brought Marty over here. So how was it for a young guy from the sophisticated metropolis of Melbourne coming to the what might have been considered in those days a backwater of Auckland? Yeah,
look, and it was a little bit, I came from a very, Melbourne's quite a sophisticated European city, and back then it was in the mid-'80s, and New Zealand wasn't that. There wasn't a cafe culture, there weren't many restaurants, and again, there was still a whole lot of old English cars on the roads, and I was a bit shocked when I first got here. But
so you came here, you hadn't been to New Zealand before. It was the first time you came here? First
time I came was when I started the job, And, being a 26-year-old then it was just an exciting adventure that I thought I'd do for a couple of years and then either go back to Australia or keep travelling. But got in the groove and, and kept sort of progressing through the ranks in New Zealand.
So you came over as account director in 95-ish?
No, it was in 88.
88, really?
Yeah.
I didn't realise that you'd been here that long.
Yeah.
So you became, worked your way up, and when I came over in 2000, and from memory, Doug Fode was the CEO, you were the managing director.
Yep, that's right, yeah.
But Doug was stepping back a bit over the
He was, and look, Doug was great. He was sort of creating room for me and thinking about what his next venture was going to be, or adventure. Again, we had a fantastic relationship, and there's some great stories in terms of how we started building the business over those years around the time when you arrived.
Yep.
And if I remember, we sort of started climbing the ladder creatively. Quite dramatically under your leadership, Paul.
I'd like to think that, but there were other things going, because you also got Jeff Ross.
Yeah,
Jeff Ross who went on to found 42 Below and is now, I think he's CEO of Moa.
Yes. I tell you, one of the greatest things that happened to me, would have been a couple of years before you started. I went to an Access Awards down in Wellington.
Yeah.
And we won one award, and I reckon Saatchi's in Wellington and Auckland combined would have won 70% of the awards that night.
Yeah.
And of a crowd of 500 people, 250 were from Saatchi's, and I sat there just humiliated.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, this is it. Never again am I going to come to an Access Award and be humiliated like that again. And it was not long after that got the opportunity to bring Jeff Ross in, because there was some magic happening with Saatchi's in those days. They were a global force in terms of their recognition. And so, it was great to get Jeff and sort of get a lot of that passion that existed in that agency back then into DDB, and he made an immediate impact.
You're producing a large amount of vodka.
Well, I let him do that on the side, and I'm really pleased for him how that ended up. But he did some great things. I remember one of the first things he did was he took a blank wall and filled it with Velcro and titled it the Wall of Fame. And he basically said to all the suits, well, there's nothing up there at the moment, so it's up to all of you to start producing work and owning work as suits that is good enough to be recognised at award shows. And I think that was part of the turning point, I think, of DDB. We were always a very solid business agency that delivered great results for clients, but we weren't. We had moments of great creative output, but we weren't consistent.
To me, there was a step change at some point along the journey around that time, where DDB, where I'm guessing that you went, right, okay, we're gonna do this seriously. It'd been a solid, as you say, occasional sparks of creative brilliance, solid agency, and you went, right, that's gonna change. We're gonna do this more creatively, properly. Is that as you remember it?
Yeah, absolutely. And if I look back now, and what I talk about a lot is if you get the culture right and the right mix of people, and you can't just rely. The reason I mentioned Jeff, for example, any agency that thinks just by hiring a rock star creative is going to get you that step change, it won't. It's got to be, the whole agency's got to be on that journey. And, it was a combination of people like Jeff, people like Janelle, people like yourself, people like Pete Thompson, who who creatively had the ability to deliver world-class work, but unless you have that team around you to create the briefs, to sell the ideas, to make sure they've got budget to be produced with quality, all those things have to come together. And for me, you talk about a great band.
Yes.
If you get the band together and it's working right, Leif, our head of planning in Australia, always talks about the Beatles, and they were all great on their own, but when you put them together, that's when the magic really happened.
But they were all great on their own. And the Who, they had a great drummer and had a great bassist, as well as Roger Daltrey and Pete Townsend, and Led Zeppelin as well, great drummer and a great bassist. So I've a very personal question, because I come over from London. I'd not been at the agency long. I can't remember, maybe a year. And I was offered a job by Colenso. And that had all been signed, sealed. I was going to go over and work with Toby Talbot. Remember him? Yeah. And you and Doug came to me. I don't know if you called me in on Saturday, and you sat me down and gave me a letter which basically said, we want you to be part of the renaissance, the creative leadership of DDB in strong terms. And obviously there was some financial sweeteners with that, but the key thing to me was that somebody showed a belief in foolishly in my ability to do that, and I wonder where that came from, and where your ability to Monty's climbing all over Marty, your ability to spot creative leadership.
Yeah, because I remember observing you as someone who had great creative ability, but I don't think at the time you had the confidence to, take that leadership role. And all you needed was that nudge, I think, or someone to say, I think you can do it. And, you were a great senior talent, and in my book, an amazing writer. And again, I saw the way you connected with people, and that next step up for any senior creative is a massive one.
Yes,
and I think a lot of younger creatives don't realise how big that step is in terms of being able to spot good ideas, sell good ideas, create a culture within a creative department, and I just saw in you something that perhaps at the time you didn't see in yourself, and it was just wonderful to see you rise to the challenge when you were given that opportunity.
I thank you, and for me, a very important part of that work. That's Monty again. He's getting bored by this conversation. Is that you were a great believer in helping people to do that and to make the best of themselves. And I remember going to Sydney with a whole bunch of other senior DDB people from Auckland to go on a two-day Omnicom senior management training course. Yep. And that made a fantastic difference to me, and I think to the other people there, in that it showed you how to run an agency. Whereas before that, I'd been just trying to do the best ad that I could, and that gave me. Excuse me.
This is getting real interesting.
You're listening to Truth
and Soul.
Just keep it. That gave me the opportunity to see the bigger picture. Yep. Do you still do those courses? Is that?
No, we do, and I think it's important that creative leaders have a really good understanding of the broader business strategy, and because you get a better understanding of what makes an agency work. I don't think you want to get creative directors into too much of the detail of that, because it can be a bit mind-numbing, but an overview in terms of how an agency functions is so important, and especially in today's world where it is a lot more complicated than it was back in the 80s and 90s in terms of the technology and the data and the different channels that we're using. I think it's really important. And again, if you're a senior part of any agency, you do have to have that understanding. So I think for me, those sort of courses are brilliant. And again, some of the thinking, I've been lucky to do quite a few of them up in at Harvard, and some of the stuff I've learnt from some of those Harvard Business School professors, I've put into practice, and I've seen it work.
Yes.
Again, when I was talking to the Wall Street Journal this morning,
that lesser organ.
I was making that point in terms of my simple formula that I've used for 20 years has been get the right people, get the most amazing talent. That will drive great creative, and then your profit will come.
Yeah.
Too many agencies in today's world, it's all about profit first, and we'll see if we can find room to hire some people, and we hope the creative will be okay. And I think I hold on to that dearly, and that's my challenge now globally is to make sure all our offices have got that mantra.
Yeah, it's not a complicated formula. I remember first coming across it all those years ago and went, okay, that's great. I can understand that. And I think a lot of other agencies outside DDB or Omnicom talk about it, but they talk about people, product and profit being the most important thing, but they kind of have them willy-nilly in terms of order, whereas you say it's there's profit first. They don't have that strict delineation between them.
Yeah, the important thing for me is and I've had 2 conversations around the world today in this regard, is I back my leaders as well. So if someone comes to me and says, look, there's this amazing copywriter, I know I haven't got budget, but I guarantee it's going to make a difference, I'll back them on some of that stuff. Yeah. Whereas if it doesn't fit with a formula with some other networks, you're just not allowed to hire that person. Yeah. And especially as we've diversified what DDB is today, when the guys from Track, our data-driven creative business, if they come to me and go, we need another data analyst, or we need someone who can run this MarTech platform, and some of it, I don't even understand half of it, but if I see the passion in their eyes, and I'll back them. I go, okay, well, if you look at me and tell me it's going to convert to better work and better profit, well then have a go. And not all of it will work, but again, that's also a lesson you have to learn.
Well, a great DDB mantra was freedom to fail.
Yeah.
That was give your people the freedom to fail. An important lesson, I think, there for wannabe creative directors, talking to other ECDs about the fact that nobody trains you how to do it. You can start by learning how to run an agency, which will. I'm not saying that you have to work up through the ranks, be an MD, be a suit, and be a CEO, but having a strong understanding of how an agency works financially, what it's trying to do, how roughly how the finances work is really
important. Really important,
I think. Okay, so I remember you. So I was. I think ECD, and I said, what do you want from me? I don't know if that's currently if that's what other leaders from departments say to you, but because I didn't really know what I was supposed to be doing, so I said, what do you want? And you said, okay, well, I want to be the best agency, most creative agency in Asia Pacific, I think was what you said. And I went, oh shit, we were about number 5 in New Zealand, I think, at the time. And so I went away and I wrote down on a piece of paper a list of things that I thought we needed to do that. And I thought, well, I'll go and see Marty with these, and he'll go, well, we're not doing that, and well, forget that. But you kind of read it for a minute, looked at it, and said, okay, right, do all of those, and that was it. And that was how we.
Yeah, and look, that's the way it should be, and I think look, you can't always say yes to everything, but you've got to give people that opportunity, and I think the other thing that people have to do with creative leaders is, you've got to invest time as well. in terms of, as you were saying, explaining what it is that drives the business, but also really start to understand what drives the individual. That's what I've learned, and it's as I said earlier, it is such a challenging job, and there's so much that rests on your shoulders as the creative leader, and you're managing the excitement and the disappointment of your team, the pressure, the rejection, the elation. So it's very emotional, and I think again those leaders of agencies that don't understand the emotional roller coaster, again, won't have that tight relationship. And I invest a lot of time with creative leaders, and I make sure the MDs and CEOs that work for me also are people that are prepared to invest that time as well, because that's what will get the best work out of people, but also you'll keep the good ones as well.
Yeah, I always thought that you had my back. I don't know what other conversations will be going on, but I felt that there was a safety net, and that if I fucked up too badly, which did happen on occasions, I seem to remember having to talk with Mike Watson from Sky about this. We had to reshoot an ad for various reasons, which was a bit unfortunate, and you had to go cap in hand to go, I made a bit of a stuff up here, Marty.
Now, if I recall, you had such a talented team that you had two different teams in your agency come up with the same idea and sell it to two different clients and produce it. And it was only when both ads were produced we realised we'd produced the same idea, if I remember, Paul. So
that was fairly accurate, and as ECD, it was absolutely my fault, and I desperately looked for other people to blame, but I couldn't find any.
And for those of you who know, back then I think we had 4 creative teams, so we had a massive team to manage. No, it was a bit bigger than that. But look, but again, for me, that was a good example where, did I get angry? No. I actually...
Not visibly, anyway.
I actually remember we had to fund another commercial for one of the clients. It was Sky, and Mike Watson was a wonderful client because at the time he understood these things happen, and we fronted up the cash to make a new ad, and he was fine. And I think for me, that's again, it's showing the freedom to fail, and backing your people who. Yeah, we will make mistakes. Some of the stuff that we produce won't be quite what we thought it was going to be when we get to the edit suites. So we've got to be prepared to, help get the thing right.
Yeah, but fellow ECDs don't kind of make a habit of that. I think I only fucked up to that major extent once.
Well, I bet you didn't do that again.
Well, not that I told you about. But, that's the main thing. And the other thing that you were very good at was coaching me, in that I think I could be obviously something that listeners will know I got over completely, ever being grumpy, but sometimes I would show my discontent or through body language in meetings, and I remember you calling me in ostensibly about something else. I got to learn that when you called me to the office to talk about something, it wasn't really what you wanted to talk about, and then it would end up just being a bit of very subtle coaching, as to sitting there with a scowl on your face, staring at a piece of paper on the desk was maybe not the best way to behave in client meetings. God knows I tried to keep to that, but I haven't always succeeded.
Yeah, but I think the thing is, no matter what level you get to in this business, you've got to always be learning, and those around you have to help you, chase your dreams. And the way I now articulate it, I didn't at the time when we were working together, but my role, the way I see it now, is to help people achieve more than they ever imagined they could in this business. And for me, that's a wonderful thought to have as a manager. And you're absolutely right. I often call myself the coach.
Yeah. And
in an interview, actually the Paul McIntyre interview, he was going, "You're quite low profile. Why is it that you're not sort of as highly visible in the media. And I made a conscious choice probably about 10 years ago my job was to make all of my up-and-coming leaders the ones that were visible. And my job was to coach them to greatness. And through that, I would get the accolades in different ways.
Yes.
And I think for me, again, that's a wonderful thought to have for young people coming up in this business, to go, whether someone's your boss or not, what are you doing to help them succeed? Because if you help them, they're going to help you.
Yeah.
And I think, again, that's part of the culture we've developed in DDB, in this part of the world, very much, is that collegiate spirit. And, we're all in this together. And obviously there's moments where people are fight and aren't happy, and there's stuff that goes on in the process. But if generally that's the sort of way we behave, and, again, when someone steps out of line and is bitchy or political, that's when, they'll have one of those quiet little meetings with me where they'll get a bit of coaching.
Yes.
And I think for me that's so important as we help people progress.
Yeah. So, Monty, just be quiet.
Keep smiling. Just keep smiling.
So at some stage during those years, I remember you came to see me, which graced me with your presence by coming down to the office, and you said, so what do you want to do in 5 years? And I'm not sure what you're asking that apropos of. It's quite a common interview question these days. So where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? And I think it's a good thing to get people thinking about from an early age. And you asked me that, and I said I would be interested in starting my own agency. And I said, what about you? What do you want to do? And you said, I want to run Australia and New Zealand from New Zealand. And I laughed. I think maybe you laughed as well. I don't know. And I said, well, that's not going to happen, because New Zealand was very much, to my mind, viewed by the Australians as a satellite of Australia, sort of slightly below Tasmania, and let's not worry about it. And occasionally they'd chuck us a bone, but they didn't really take much interest. And the idea that although as highly regarded as DDB New Zealand was, that you'd be in a position to run both of those seemed unlikely to me. Maybe you knew more than me, but it happened. How did that come about?
Well, it came about because it was about 15 years ago. New Zealand made more money than Australia in one particular year, and I think eventually the powers that be in DDB said there's something wrong here, and that's where they said to me, "Will you take on the job to run both countries?" And they said it has to be in Sydney. And I said yes to that, and knowing that, I had a plan to get the business sorted and then come back to New Zealand. So I spent 3 years building up DDB in Sydney, and we had an incredible ride in terms of business wins and growth during those 3 years. It was so listen to this. So I've said yes to taking on the role.
Yeah.
And I rang the biggest client then in Australia was McDonald's. So I rang the McDonald's CEO, a guy called Peter Bush, and said, "Hey, Bushy, some exciting news. I've just been put in the new Trans-Tasman role, sort of running DDB Australia and New Zealand. Just wanted to let you know as our most important client." The first thing he did was say, "I think you should not take the role."
That's it.
He said, "We're going to fire you next week."
Fuck.
And
Right.
and I said, "Right, okay. Will you give me a month?" And he said, "I'll have to talk to the CMO because he's about to go and make an appointment at the agency to finish things up. And to his credit, and the CMO at the time, they gave me a period of time, and we very quickly turned things around. And I think that was part of the start of the journey in Australia, where we won Telstra, we won Tourism Australia, we won we won Coles supermarkets. We had an amazing run of business wins. And that 3 years was extraordinary. And we gave the people the confidence. We were really on fire. And
it was pretty much Matt Eastwood came in, I think, as ECD
at the same time.
But the Matt
it was the same people,
same management, and same.
Yeah, and it was a case of taking a team that probably the band analogy. It was a great set of individuals, but hadn't quite worked out how to work together. And some of those guys are still there now.
Yes.
So I'm really sort of proud of what we achieved then, and the strength of what we got Australia to gave me the power to say, well, I'm going to go back to New Zealand and run the business regionally from Auckland. And, I've been doing that for the last 12 years.
And that was, and you wanted to do that for mainly family reasons?
Yeah, for family reasons. Deborah's a Kiwi, and I wanted the kids to do their secondary schooling in New Zealand. And I knew I could actually do it. It just meant I had to travel a bit, but it's actually worked out really well. And there's still, again, I sort of moved back quite quietly, and I think there's still a few Australian clients that actually think I still live in Australia.
Careful, we have a lot of listeners to this podcast all over the net.
No, but I think that's the beauty of it, is that I was regularly in the Sydney and Melbourne offices and very visible and very much a part of the agency. And I equally divided my time between Australia and New Zealand. So I was there supporting all those leaders on their journeys, as we were discussing before.
And you got Sandy in as he was CEO of.
Yes.
In New Zealand.
Yes, he was, and
because Sandy Moore, listener, had worked with Doug Foday, and so it was Sandy and Doug and Mark. So the consistency there, and Sandy had kind of taken a backward step, and you got him.
Yeah, and look, and Sandy's been a huge part of the success of New Zealand in terms of. He set up a lot of our diversified businesses in terms of PR and direct marketing and sales promotions over the years, and he did a terrific job as I went to Australia, and for 7 or 8 years was CEO running the business, and again, executing the business strategy that we'd set up as part of that focus of growth and desire to be the biggest and the best in New Zealand. And Sandy's now retired. He's been retired for 5 years, but he still feels part of the agency, and we regularly catch up, and he cheers us a lot from the sidelines, which is great.
Yeah. I caught up with Sandy last on a plane to Houston. He was going to get off to see Ronald McDonald. Marty, if it's all right, I'm going to we'll just have a quick stop there, a quick loo break, and I will take Monty to the car.
You're going to have lots of strange noises.
The constant whinging. I don't know why. He's had like 4 walks today. I would have thought he'd be okay.
He just loves you.
On the other hand, his dog provides a great source of comfort and security. That combination of new lung power is hard on the neighbors.
Sorry about that.
Yep, no problem.
Marty, you've hired a number of ECDs over the years in New Zealand and Australia, and you've had great creative continuity over that time. As much as I'd like to say it was all down to me, you've obviously proved that it's not an individual ECD, but that you're very good at hiring them and enabling them to do their job. What do you look for in an ECD? How is it that you manage to kind of get this consistency of nice and talented?
Well, I think the first thing is you've got to find someone who has the talent and has a track record. But for me, I look to people that have got probably two things. One is the ability to nurture that talent and manage them in a way that will help them create the brilliant ideas. I never look for creative directors who are going to try to write all the ads themselves, because there's a few of them around. And most importantly, you've got to have a combination of creative skill and the ability to build relationships and sell that work. And again, if I look at you, if I look at someone like Toby, I look at Matt Eastwood, I look at Damon, there's a similar thing that you see, amazing raw talent, but the ability to sell. And I think sometimes we underestimate the pressure our clients are under when they're sitting there having 3 ideas presented at them and we're sitting there leaning forward on the table going, do you like it? Do you like it? And, again, the great creative directors just give clients confidence to say yes. And those that sit on the fence and unsure of their work, the clients feel it as well. Yeah. So they're the sorts of qualities I look for. And, that's a proven formula. And, the ability of a great creative to take a client on a journey. And sometimes it's not all about the size of the budgets, but, to take what might have been a brief with a $300,000 budget attached to it that ends up being $1 million production. It's not that we're trying to actually get the client to spend more money. We've just got the client to think bigger. And for me, that's what I just love when you sort of see the power of, say, what we do for Lotto. And there's been a number of people within Lotto over the years that have questioned why we spend so much money. And it's not about the fact that it's a lot of money. It's about that they're big ideas that are actually going to connect with New Zealanders and make them feel something. And again, that's a hard thing to sell, off a piece of paper with a little story about a pirate or whatever it happens to be. And again, I look for people that are great storytellers. And, you're one of them.
I certainly wouldn't put myself down as a great salesman of advertising, but I think I was lucky when we worked together. I had some good people around me.
Yeah, but I think that's part of it as well, because others are better salesmen than others, but then it's like, sometimes you have to lean a bit more on some of the suits or the strategist or some of your creatives. And again, I saw your confidence build as you produced more and more great work, and I saw clients like Sky TV is a really good one, where there was absolute confidence in over time whatever you presented, it was a yes, and again, the proof is in what you deliver, and again, I think also when you develop those relationships, you probably care more than the client almost to make sure it's going to be good. Because you don't want to let them down, because you've got a personal relationship at the end of the day.
Definitely, yeah. You don't want to. You don't want to. Well, you never want to stuff up. I mean, you never want something to be embarrassing, but it's not just for yourself; it's for the client as well. If someone's put the faith in you to do it, you desperately want it to work out and
absolutely
and be successful. So, 20 years of unprecedented creative and business success down here. I don't mean this interview to sound like a hagiography about because we haven't worked together for 15 years, but DDB over the last 20 years in New Zealand has had tremendous success, and you've been behind it. But now you go off to New York and you have to coach CEOs in other network agencies who will no doubt be going, oh, I remember, you know, I saw him 20 years ago and think that much of him, and now he's sitting in the office telling me what to do. He doesn't even speak our language. How is that going to go?
Look, I've got no doubt I'll have my challenges. The good thing is those around our network have seen the consistent success of DDB Australia, New Zealand. So it's not as if we've just had a couple of good years. We've had, as you say, really the last 20 years has been pretty strong, and we've shown continued creative recognition, but also our financials have been brilliant. So from that point of view, people do sit forward and listen, and the reception I've had over the last 2 weeks since my role was announced has been fantastic. And I do believe it's quite genuine. And I do have my people in the network as well that tell me what people are really thinking. And I think there's a genuine excitement, because I'm not coming in to just keep everyone doing exactly what they're doing today and let's all be happy with where we're at. Yeah. I've already sent a signal out to the whole network of 10,000 people that it is the mission of every DDB office to be number one. Many of our offices are there. Some are almost there, and some have a long way to go. And so we will be building plans for all three types of agencies that we have in our network. And I will not rest until we are number one at CAN. And, you know, we often talk about top three at CAN. I will be number one at CAN. And as you know, I am quietly spoken but extremely competitive, and I that's the mandate that I'm insisting is there for all of our leaders. And some regions are going to be much harder than others. We've got some fabulous offices, you know. Adam and Eve DDB, DDB in Paris, DDB in Colombia, Miami, you know. So we've got some amazing agencies, but we've got a lot of others that have to rise to that position that, Bill Birnbach would want us to have.
So are you going to say to to the heads of offices, okay, I want you to be number one in the market. What's your plan for getting there?
Yeah, look, I've written a plan for the network, which I'm rolling out, and then that will help guide each of the. It's my secret formula. Yeah. And that will help guide all of the offices, and I'm really realistic. It doesn't happen overnight, but I've been there. You know, I etched in my memory is that day in Wellington when I sat there with Saatchi's dominating things, and we all need something like that to galvanise us. And no one likes coming second or third, really. It's good on your journey, but there's nothing better than when you're Agency of the Year, or you've won more Access Awards or more at Award or at Cannes or any of the other major shows. And again, I think it's amazing to see how New Zealand, and it was pioneered by Saatchi, so I've got to admit that, how we do so well at Cannes relative to the size of the market. And we've been a big contributor to that, and so have agencies like Colenso. And that's definitely going to be the mission of all DDB offices, and that excites a lot of people in the network that they've got a CEO who's saying that.
There's a lot of skullduggery, cheating that goes on at CAN, obviously potentially from lesser networks. There's always the possibility that in order to get to the position of number one, you may have to resort to that skullduggery.
Yeah, and look, I don't mind a little bit of that on the side. It's part of what we do. I should qualify when I talk about number one. Creative Awards only one of the measures. there's three measures for me. One is creative awards. One is client satisfaction. Like you might have a client who doesn't win a lot of awards, but we're doing the best work in the category. So for me, that's something to celebrate. And the number three is the effectiveness of that creative. So as I measure it, it's not just purely we've won more CAN awards than everyone. It's that sort of holistic measure of creative leadership is how I look at things. And look, end of the day, in an agency where we work extremely hard to create platforms and great bits of creative for our big clients, you know, we have to also give our creatives an outlet to come up with amazing ideas for smaller clients or for charities. And, you know, I really applaud the ones that actually do something that does help a charity, or, you know, I do worry about the one-off billboard that really doesn't sort of make any difference at all. But, you know, again, I remember a client once saying to me is, you know, tell your creatives if they can get my sales going at least 5% in growth, I'll give them a full page to do a press ad, something really cool, which maybe I won't like that much, but I'll give them that reward. Now, for me, that's a great client who says, you know, I know what really drives them, and you know, there's a gift I'll give you for getting my sales going. But
yeah, I mean, what drives me more than that personally now than that single page to do whatever you want is the riddle of how to get of how to help the client to be more effective. This is the client's issue. How do we solve that? To me, is a way more interesting and fulfilling problem than this is the client's problem. How can we win an award for it?
Look, I'm totally with you, and that's why for me that's the one of the important measures of creative leadership. And the good thing about DDB, again, say in New Zealand, is we don't only win great numbers of creative awards. We're always dominant in the Effies, and that's a huge focus for us. And you know, when you actually have a client like Lotto that creatively is really well regarded and wins lots of major awards, but then also wins, you know, it's won a lot of Effies. You know, for me, that's what really we should all be celebrating when you get both working together.
Yeah. Who is does DDB have a global ECD at the moment?
Do we have a global? Yes, we do. We do.
Oh, who's that?
Hey,
who is it?
You should know.
I know I should, but I haven't.
No, it's a guy called Ari Weiss, who was.
No, I didn't know. I had no idea.
Yeah, Ari was. He was head of North America.
Yeah,
and he's been in the global role for about a year now, I think.
Okay.
And he's doing a terrific job, and he'll be a key partner of mine in the journey that we go on globally. And he's got a great group of creative leaders around the world that we get together regularly. So again, I'll be spending a lot of time with them, and then, again, that'll be a signal to all of them that the global CEO is actually going to invest time meeting with the creative leaders in all the different regions and helping them on their journeys from a regional point of view, but also down to a local market point of view.
And the global chief creative officer is going to spend some time on his PR so that even doofuses like me living on a beach have heard from him. Yeah. Now, I've got a few questions here from avid listeners. A gentleman called Doug Fode wants to know, what was the tipping point that led you to leave your hometown Melbourne to come join DDB New Zealand 37 years ago? I think you've answered that.
I have.
It was him.
He said to me, "Don't worry, Marty, resign, and I promise you I'll hire you the next day." And you got to imagine, like, I was like 2 years into my career, and so Doug orchestrated all of that, and the Australian CEO at the time went nuts. It went up to New York. It became a major issue within DDB, and I'm sitting there going, "Hey, I'm a 2 year in young, naive account guy going, what the hell's going on here? But, to Doug's credit, he got his way and the Australian bloke at the time missed out.
And Andrew Scott, who you may know.
Yes, I do, yeah.
Previous CEO of TBWA in Melbourne and Auckland. He wants to know if you were the most successful of all your mates at school. I think this is a pointed question.
How do you define success? We've got
a global CEO of an advertising network.
That's pretty good, yeah. And I don't think I've got many from school that are doing sort of global roles from that point of view, but there are guys who are brain surgeons and, top flight engineers and far more important jobs in terms of humanity. Yeah. But look, it's
with proper jobs.
It's at school I never thought I would actually ever rise to this sort of level. And even I remember thinking as a young bloke, if I got to group account director, that would mean I've made it in advertising. I never actually dreamed that I'd sort of get to run an agency. And I think to everyone who's young in the industry, it's like, dream big, because, if you're a good person, you work hard and you're smart, you can go anywhere in this industry.
Well, this is something I've been giving a lot of thought to in my time between dog walking and fishing, is that you can't all do it. DDB has 10,000 people. You have one global CEO, and okay, you can. It's about making the most of what you've got and outperforming.
I think it's really important we also celebrate a lot of people are happy at a certain level. And, if you become a great writer and you might go, I never want to be a creative director.
Yeah.
We've got to actually celebrate that because, and I often say that, there's lots of great account directors that don't want the responsibility of going up to that next level. And that's a good thing. And we not everyone has that ambition. And sometimes you don't even know you've got that ambition until you've done a role for a period of time and you go, oh, I think I could probably go the next level. And, even doing the regional role, in the early days, I would have thought, well, there's no way I could have, I'm not Keith Reinhardt, how could I do that role?
Yeah.
But over time you build confidence and you get frustrated and you see what's possible. And, I've been given opportunities to do bigger roles a number of times over the last 10 years. And I've always said no, putting life in New Zealand ahead of that. But there was just a moment, and it was probably, bizarrely, it was probably because of COVID. I sort of thought, this is probably the hardest time to go and do a role like this. So
let's do it.
Let's do it. And it might sound bizarre, but I thought, what a great challenge.
Okay. A listener called Emily O'Halloran wants to know who your favourite child is, which I think that may be a leading question again, but I think maybe possibly a more important question of that is, have any of your 3 kids shown any interest in following you into advertising?
Well, Emily, as I always say to her, she's my favourite eldest child.
Yes.
No, Emily actually is an extremely talented writer, and she's working for a PR agency called Thrive, and doing a great job. And importantly, wants to make her own way in the world and not work for one of Dad's agencies.
Very foolish.
And she did some work experience at Mango, and Claudia and the team loved her. But to her credit, she went and got her own job.
Well done.
And so she's loving it, doing well. And my youngest daughter is just finishing a graduate diploma. She's done a marketing degree at Massey, and she's now doing a graduate diploma in social media. And to her credit, again, she said, there is no way I'm going to work at any of your agencies, because she did some work experience, and people always introduce her as Marty's daughter. Yeah. That didn't go down very well with Maggie. So, and to her credit, she'll find her own thing, and I like that independence and spirit. It's good.
I think you got to mention Matthew as well.
And Matthew, he's gone a totally different direction. He's done a finance degree, and now he's just finishing a master's in software engineering. So he's currently working on a startup, and he's also going to start a job at Atlassian in Sydney early next year, which is like an incredible tech company in Australia in terms of it's an amazing story. So that's a great opportunity for him.
Well done to all of them. Now, Deborah sent me an email, and a couple of things stood out for me, which I thought were interesting. One was that you always did your utmost to be home to watch the 6 o'clock news with the family. I think in my life in advertising, I've maybe once a month I would ever have got home at time for 6 o'clock. So somehow you've managed to get, although you do get up pretty early for gym or coaching or whatever, but you've managed to maintain a pretty healthy home life balance.
Look, I think it's a really important thing for all of us to think about, because the time with your kids goes really quickly. And my dad actually worked in retail and worked huge hours, and so I didn't see him a lot. And that's really driven me to make sure you're there for the school swimming sports, or you're there to pick your kids up occasionally. And importantly, as much as you can, try to be home to have dinner with the family. And of course, there's times where we have to work till midnight for a pitch and all that sort of thing. And, I actually get quite concerned when I see agencies that I run that are consistently making people work really late.
Yeah.
For me, there's something we're doing wrong as managers. Yeah. And sometimes people like that. So you've got to accept some people like sort of starting late in the morning, and they like working at night. But, I think we owe it to our people to give them a good balance. And I think everyone loves the excitement of a pitch, and we don't mind working all weekend and working through till 3 in the morning. That's part of the adrenaline that drives people in agencies. But I think if we're doing that consistently, it's not a good thing. So, and I look at the scale of DDB Auckland, and 7 o'clock there's hardly anyone there. And Sharon, my PA, said the other day, change the security code. And bugger all people have asked me for the security code, which you need to work on the weekends to turn the alarms off. And I thought, how amazing is that we're not flogging these people sort of every weekend. So for me, that's smart management. Okay, well that suggests I was probably doing it wrong, because when I was at DDB, I think say at 6:30, every single member of the creative department would be there, but nobody else would be in the agency. Creatives work harder. That's just the way it is. The other thing Deborah mentioned I found interesting was that she said that you wake up every morning with the same energy and enthusiasm for the day. And my question to you is that a lucky accident, or is that something that you have to work on? Look, it's funny. I think we mentioned earlier that I did a bit of rowing, and if you're a rower, you get very used to getting up at like 5 in the morning, and you don't let your teammates down, because if you're in a rowing 8 and one person doesn't turn up, you can't go out and train. Yeah. And as a result of that, I've always been a morning person, but I think life's too short to be negative, and every day is a new day, and I do try to be positive, and I think as leaders, sometimes you need to hold some of your frustrations internally as well, and because your job is to make people feel positive. One of the greatest compliments I got once was my PA in Sydney said, "I just love it when you arrive because we just feel you in the agency." And some people who are negative, you feel the negativity when they walk around an agency.
Yeah.
And for me, that understanding that people look to us leaders as to give them confidence and to be up and to be positive. And even though you might be really depressed about something, if you wear that on your sleeve, it's going to bring everyone down.
Yep.
So that's always been how I roll.
Yeah, I think that's probably where I struggled. Okay, last question, Marty. Biggest mistake in your career?
Biggest mistake. I think oh no, it's not big enough. Look, I haven't made huge mistakes. I think I spoke about it earlier. I think the biggest mistake was not discovering the love of creative early enough in my career, and I think I've been thinking a lot about how we recruit people, and I don't think we're as thorough as we should be when we're hiring people. Too much in advertising, it's like, I really like that person. And you meet them for like half an hour and you flick through a CV or whatever. And I think I was talking to a client who was going for an interview and they had to give a presentation. They had to write a case study. They had to do all sorts of other tests. And not that I want to do a whole lot of psychometric testing, but, are we finding enough people that have got a true love for what we do? And, I wish I discovered that earlier. So probably for the first 10 years of my career, I wasn't that motivated by great creative. It was about getting great sales for McDonald's. And there's nothing wrong with that. We did really well. But I think just taking it to another level, sort of really seeing the true power of great creative, I think sort of helped me go to another level.
It's interesting what you mentioned about recruitment. In that I hate it when people go, tests have been done, but I remember there's a large American business. It might have been McKinsey or somebody like that. They had a massively stringent employment and interview process that they went through, which after some time they then found was completely useless, and their strike rate of getting people was no more successul through an extensive interview process than it was through a half an hour chat going, they seem like a good person.
Look, both work. And look, if I'm honest, I can tell in the first 10 minutes of chatting to someone if they're going to fit or not. Yeah. But I suppose I'm really drilling down to sort of the new entrants into our industry, and there's lots of nepotism and friends, daughters, and sons, and there's all of a sudden these people just get jobs, and you go, do they deserve it? Are they showing the passion? And I think the more we hire people with that real passion at a young age, we're going to get a huge amount of benefit going forward. Actually, I thought of one mistake I made, and this was before email. And I, with the right intention, I sent a note to a creative team and the creative director, basically saying, look, I thought your work was amazing. It was one of the best campaigns for this client that I've ever seen. And quite frankly, the client's an idiot for not buying the work. And unfortunately, my PA at the time sort of, doing the photocopying and putting them in envelopes, sent a copy of my internal memo to the client. And I never forget the day when I opened the envelope that he sent back to me, and it was just in red pen. It was like, I think I'm a reasonable judge of a creative idea, and that was it. And then I had to then work out what that next conversation was going to be like. And we laughed about it afterwards, but at the time it wasn't great. And but look, my heart was in the right place because I actually thought it was a great idea, and I was backing my creatives, and I was trying to say to them, look, I tried to sell it as well, but just your heart sinks when you sort of open that envelope and go, have we just been fired?
That is an excellent mistake. There's actually one thing that I feel I need to ask you. After I'd been at DDB for a year, we had a Christmas party so this would have been 2001, and it was the one where Scott Wallace and Jeff Ross turned up in a limo, and it was somewhere in East Auckland, just for context in case you remember it. And there were various presentations and backslapping and prize giving, and you gave an award to the person of the year for the agency. Do you remember who that was?
Was that Jenny Travers?
No, she wasn't there then.
No, who was it?
It was Doug Foday.
Right.
And so I was there I'd come over and I've gone, brilliant, I'm at DDB, we're starting to do some work that we're proud of, there's a great bunch of people here and at a party, I wonder who gets a person of the year. And there's no, I'm not saying that Doug didn't deserve it, but you don't do that. You don't give the departing CEO person of the year. You give it to someone who's done brilliantly in finance or the head of production or whatever. And I that to me was like a bit of a punch in the stomach of this is not the agency that I thought it was. But it got turned around. It got turned around, and your attitude, I think, changed from then, which was a good thing.
Yeah, and obviously that was part of the sort of recognition of what Doug had done for the agency. We give lots of awards to everyone, as you know, but I agree with you. The reason I mentioned someone like Jenny, because she's a great example of a young suit that in her early days, sat down with creatives and said, how am I going to help sell some great ideas, and developed a reputation very quickly that she could deliver that. And the creatives were very eager to work on any of her briefs because she was really passionate about the work. And, again, it comes back to that point I was making earlier that we need more people like that are super passionate about the work, not just super passionate about hitting a deadline. Yeah.
Hi, JT. I bet she'll be very happy with that shout out. And
she gets that instead of a pay increase. So that's how we keep her happy with us.
I think she'd still prefer that. And I love. I mean, she's been at DDB for nearly as long as you.
Yeah, long time actually.
Over 15 years.
Yeah, over 15 years, I think. Yeah.
I think it's great to see people that come up through the ranks in an agency. We got one of the associate creative directors, I think he is at what do we call now, Barnes Catman Friends Dentsu. He started as a Mac guy, Brad.
Right.
Done well. Anyway, Marty, sorry to keep you. Thank you so much for chatting. I know that you have have you got a full night of New York coming up?
No, I've got Europe at 7:00. Catching up with the president of Europe, DDB Europe, not the president of Europe. There isn't a president of Europe, but so just talking about some of the things we're working on in the European part of our business, which is huge.
Yeah.
So that's tonight.
Well, brilliant. Thanks again. I'm sure you'll do a great job, and we will watch from down in New Zealand and see how you get on.
And thanks for all you taught me when we worked together, Paul. It was a beautiful time.
Marty, thanks.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Truth
And Soul,
The New Zealand Advertising Podcast.
Okay, so thank you very much to the usual suspects for putting this together. Jonathan, Vanessa, Cole, Shane and the rest of the crew from Franklin Road. Drop me a line at paul@truthandsoul.co.nz if you have helpful comments, unbounded praise or fishing tips. Now, we have a few people who are keen to come on, and hopefully we can arrange that before too long. Organisation has never been my strong point, as many will attest, and we had a few issues with COVID-19, obviously. Now, young people tell me that apparently I need to encourage you to subscribe, so please find yourself encouraged. Also, a 5-star review on iTunes helps, I believe. I know this may be perjury, but it's for a good cause-ish. Thank you for listening. Here's Matt Stalker to play out for you. Check out Matt Stalker and Fables on Spotify. They're great. Stay safe. Thank you.
On the Farewell Drive, we found 100 ways that our hands fit together. Centrifugal force pulls us apart as we spin. Please forgive my trembling hands, crudely silhouetted by the flickering spires of candlelight, while the wicked sleep sound, the anxious toss and turn. Thoughts come not as single spies, but in battalions, while the wicked sleep sound, the anxious toss and turn. And it's at times like these that we understand our Father's fascination with dendrology. The family tree is losing its leaves. Please forgive my trembling hands, crudely silhouetted by the flickering spires of candlelight, while the wicked sleep sound, the anxious toss and turn. Thoughts come not as single spies, but in battalions, while the wicked sleep sound, the anxious toss and turn.